Last year at this conference, we were virtual, of course. The New Deal Forum released policy recommendations for state and local leaders to better align K-12 schools with higher education and to better align our overall education system with workforce opportunities. Since then, we have also released a guide for using American Rescue Plan funds to build high-quality college and career pathways for all students. And you can find those on our website at newdealforum.org. As you will hear during this session, we and our partners are positioned to help you implement these policies, and we are excited to help more of you in this space. I want to say many thanks to our partners at All for Ed, led by CEO Deb Delisle, who I know is here, and to the co-chairs of our Education Policy Group, Georgia Senator Elena Parent, Montgomery, Alabama Mayor Stephen Reed, and former West Sacramento Mayor Chris Cabaldon, who will moderate this portion of the program. So I want to go ahead and introduce the mayor, who as leader of West Sacramento, I think is a perfect person to lead this conversation. He really spearheaded just an incredible amount of progress on education. His Idea Challenge winning idea, the West Sacramento Home Run, launched a Cradle to Career initiative, improving access to everything from quality early childhood education to work-based learning to post-secondary attendance and completion. He has also been a state and national leader on these issues, serving as Vice Chancellor of California's Community College System, and also co-chairing the Jobs, Education, and Workforce Committee for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So, Mayor, thank you for your leadership, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much. It's great to see so many friends, see everybody in person, and see so many friends and colleagues. Let me also say that there is life after the mayorship, and as somebody who spent 22 years in it, the power of our ideas to really change and transform our communities is durable. And even though our time is not, our ability to really drive the kinds of change and to build our communities back better is real. So today we're going to focus on trying to get granular and implementation-based around college and career pathways and build off the work of the report that Jonathan mentioned, and particularly to locate it in the context of the Build Back Better agenda and all of the disparate ranges of funding sources and new programs that are out there that can help us to accelerate implementation and support of college and career pathways at the local level. We all know why it's so important. If this were the year 1900, we would be having a debate about whether or not everybody should go to high school or not. Today we take that for granted, that of course in a society where you have to have the skills both for citizenship and for the workforce that a high school diploma provides, that of course we assume and insist that everybody goes. You don't apply to go from the 11th grade to the 12th grade. You don't need to look around for financial aid to think about going from 9th grade to 10th grade. We just do it. We've incorporated and reformed our systems to deliver on that outcome. Now, today we know that the minimum requirement to be able to qualify for 80% of good paying jobs today and into the future is a college degree. And a college degree isn't everything. I know a lot of folks are love to say not everybody needs a college degree, and that is true, and not everybody needs a colonoscopy, but we do need a system that gives people the choice to have a colonoscopy and the systems to deliver it. We don't decide in advance which populations or which zip codes can get access to healthcare procedures, even though not everybody needs to have it. We declare that it's the right of the individual, but also the need for the individual and for our workforce and for our society for that to be the case. So today, the level of skills to navigate the workforce, to be a productive participant, whether as an employee or as an entrepreneur, but also to navigate the complexity of citizenship in our communities, in our states, and in our country, demands this sort of work. And so the report that New Deal Forum issued last year really insists on dramatically increasing college attainment and its linkages to career through career pathways that persist from the secondary school experience through college and into career. and all of the various policy levers that we can provide at the local level, school boards and city councils and mayor's offices, but also at state legislatures and state boards of education, at community colleges and public universities and chambers, and of course at the national level as well, the key levers that are going to help us get there. So I want to, we'll get to you in a second, David, but I want to first ask Cheryl Vonish, who is the CEO of Norwalk Community College in Connecticut, who has done a tremendous amount of work in this space. And often when we talk about college and career pathways, the world that people are imagining is a place where education and employers and the workforce all come together. The sort of mystical place that, could we create such a thing where employers might come to the table and so would folks who can help with learning. But we have such a thing, right? We have, the community colleges are doing that. So I wonder if you could lead us off with a sense of about what it is, what college and career pathways mean from the lens and the perspective of community college.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I think maybe the one piece of that that may have been missing, and so I want to brag a little bit. So it's not only business and industry, but the community colleges, but also our K-12 partners. And so we have really been excited about the success of our P-TECH model in Norwalk. And so for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a model that really brings together three key partners. Business and industry at Norwalk, it is IBM Corporation, the community colleges, and also the K-12, so our high schools. And so all of our graduates from our P-TECH program graduate with a high school diploma at the same time that they graduate with an associate's degree. They also have the opportunity to really engage in work-based learning. And so those students in our NECA program, they are integrated into IBM. They are assigned an IBM mentor, which I think is truly amazing, because many of our students, if you're just thinking about the academic side and the skills that we want to make sure that we're developing, there are some of those kind of soft skills in terms of, what do you wear to a job interview? How to successfully, engage with colleagues in the workplace. And so those IBM mentors have really been instrumental in helping our students achieve some of those soft skills. In 2018, that was the first year that we graduated 12 P-TECH students. And so it was really a time for celebration for us. One of the things that I'm constantly thinking of just in this space and with the work that we've been doing is one of the graduates that year, a young man, the first ever in his family to go to college, graduating with his high school diploma, an associate's degree in software engineering, tuition in forms of scholarship to continue his academic career at UConn, and he was also starting a summer internship at IBM. Okay, and so we know, especially in Connecticut, to land such an opportunity, oftentimes we only see that happening with some of our four-year university students. And so it was really a great occasion to really see the true impact of what happens when we all get to the table. So I'll kind of stop there just in terms of P-TECH, because otherwise I'll keep going on and on in terms of some of the great work that we're doing. Well,
P-TECH is definitely worth on, and so if you've never heard of it, it's worth checking it out. It's one of the most profound models around the country, and it's been around long enough to say that it's not a flash in the pan. It's not a one-hit wonder. P-TECH is really a powerful model, and I think what you say has implications for those of us that are working in a lot of different spaces. A lot of times we might check out of college and career pathways. That's for the school board to work on, and yeah, there's definitely a role for the school board to be undertaking there too. But a lot of classrooms struggle to get employer participants. And school board members can have very robust relationships with employers, but the mayor can have much more. And a lot of employers need something from City Hall, a zoning change or something else. The leverage that City Hall can play as a partner in bringing those employers to the table can be really powerful. I remember I was in a classroom at Long Beach, in a high school in Long Beach. The classroom was in two spaces. So the geometry teacher was in one corner teaching the Pythagorean theorem and everything else, and in the other corner, students were building a small house, and going back and forth between their construction skills and geometry in the same room with two different teachers. But that requires teacher training, it requires collaboration, it requires a school board to say it's okay for those to be together. And then it requires higher education to say, we'll accept that course as a math for math. And you say, well, of course they would accept. No, most of the time they don't. And why? Well, one, it's different. That's a career course. That's not a math class. But also that when you're building a house, you need the math that you need when you need that math. So it might be today's Pythagorean theorem, but tomorrow you need trigonometry, and the next day you're at analytical geometry or something else. But so the sequencing over the course of 3 semesters of your career course, you will pick up all of the math dimensions that you need for the university or for the community college, but you may not get it in exactly the same packets, and sequence that you would get in the traditional curriculum. And so one of the challenges for state legislators to tackle in many states is exactly this one, is how to help universities and colleges translate their course requirements for admission, for those that have course requirements for admission, in ways that can see the learning that's occurring in these career pathways as well.
Well, you know, I have to say, I think one of the things that was almost as an incentive to get business and industry to the table in this case is that we allowed them to have input in terms of what the curriculum is. And so, you know, when we came together to that table, it was sharing with IBM, okay, here's the course sequence and here are the outcomes of our software engineering course. And then having them provide some input in terms of, well, here's what will really be helpful if we, you know, had a graduate who then came and worked at IBM. And I think on the academic side, being willing, you know, to be flexible, because I think historically, oftentimes in academia, we kind of, you know, we hold on very tightly to that academic freedom. But it was, I think, really the first time to see, I think faculty understood, okay, well, I can see like how this will contribute to that skill set that IBM needs. And so really just the collaboration that's taking place has been really exciting. I think in terms of the path ahead, you know, what I'm hearing and kind of seeing is, especially coming out of COVID, and we can definitely say that, right? We are coming out of COVID. We're getting there. One of the things we're seeing is a desire to have similar pathways in our health career programs. And so it's getting the presidents and the CEOs of our local hospitals together with our faculty, and also, you know, kind of including K through 12 in terms of some of those students who already show an interest in some of those fields, inviting them to the campus so that they can see and really participate and engage with our nursing sim lab, for example. And so we're starting to see really that this is a model in terms of developing really strong career pathways across the board.
David Silva, let's bring you into the conversation. So David, you and I have been collaborators for a long time because one of us had the very first Cradle to Career Promise program in all of the United States, and we don't have to decide who. I think you probably had the first one. We had the first funded one. But we learned everything we were doing from you. So David Silva led the Oakland Promise program with Mayor Libby Schaaf, who we'll hear from in just a bit, and as since then is helping to lead and coordinate and coach all of his peer programs around the country. So there's a lot of expertise in the full continuum that's involved in college and career pathways. And so maybe you could share with us the overall model and approach.
Sure. So I'm a former teacher myself, so I'm going to need everybody's involvement. I know you're on your phones and all that kind of stuff, but like if you can put up, and I'm also a dad, and I like to give my son a slap five. If you could put up your 10 fingers right now. Everybody put up 10 fingers. So pretend these 10 fingers represent Oakland students. How many of these students that start out in 9th grade actually graduate? Maybe put on your fingers how many you think that is. Okay, I see 6 over there, I see 4, okay. It's actually about 6 graduate from high school. Keep going, and we're not done. How many actually go to college? It's gonna keep going down, 4. And then how many actually complete college? The answer is between 1 and 2. So if you're 1, it's about 15%. That is not equity. And when the Mayor Schaaf heard about this idea that only 15% of our kids actually are eligible to are actually graduating from college, we realized we had to make a change. So we asked the superintendent, one of the key themes I want to emphasize here is it's not just about one thing, it's got to be about a both-and strategy, and it's got to be about partnerships. Mayor doesn't control the school system. She knows in order to have a world-class system in a city, you need to have a world-class education system. So we said, superintendent, what's one thing we can do? He said, you can launch the Oakland Promise. So like, all right, let's do that. We saw these college promise programs from around there, but we realized we couldn't start it at the end. We needed to start it at the beginning from the moment our babies that were Medi-Cal eligible were born. So we decided to do a cradle to career program that said we're gonna do it all. And I knew this because I was a teacher. I was a second grade teacher and I was a principal. And I remember Jessica Ramos, who was one of my former students. I have her picture over here. I'll show you later. She was at Cal Berkeley with me as a kindergartner, and her mom as well. We took a bus from our school to Berkeley, and she's like, wow, I can see it. I can feel it. And that was a seed for me, that it's not just about doing stuff at the end. We've got to bring people along. It's not just the money, but it's the mentality that I am going to college. So I'm going to just share this slide here just to give you a little bit of a sense of what this is. We took best practices from across the country. Starting in Maine, there was this program that basically gave college savings accounts. Do you all know if you have a college savings account as a baby, how much more likely you are to go to college? 3 times. And then 4 times as likely, or maybe more, 4 times as likely to graduate, unless Chris actually may know more than me. But anyway, the bottom line is that it's a big impact. And it's like $500, that's not that much. So we said, what if we actually make it so that every single baby that is Medi-Cal eligible has that? We now have served over 1,000 babies with that Brilliant Baby support, as well as financial coaching and support for the mom. Then you go to kindergarten. We got 5,000 kindergartners. What is it like if every single kindergartner, when they go to school, they know they got $100 waiting for them at the end? $100, that's nothing, right? But all of a sudden, they put up that $100 certificate, and they talk to their parents about it, and we generate conversations. We go to the schools, and then they can feel it and know that I got money at the end of this, and I'm going to be supported. And then once you actually go to high school, having centers on campus that were done in Denver that basically are future centers where you can envision what you want to become, get support like FAFSA. It's like, great, but how do you actually fill it out? How do you navigate them through the system? And then I think what's most important is that we didn't just say like scholarships, but scholarships and persistent support, mentoring to make sure that students from first generation backgrounds are able to graduate from college. So that's kind of what Oakland Promise is. I'm happy to share a little bit more, but my big message is it's not one thing, it's a both and. And as the mayor talks about, often we fail because we're not audacious enough.
That's terrific. And maybe you could give us a sense, David, about the where we're at now in terms of like what are the impacts that you're starting to see in Oakland from this? It looks like you may have.
I think I might even have it here if I can get it back. You know, I'm pretty bad at this stuff, but yeah. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I think it's right here. Okay, or it can help. Well, I'll just say it. Basically, we have served over 30,000 kids that are kindergartners now have a college savings, money for college. Actually, I'll go back here, sorry. Okay, all right, okay. Anyway, bottom line is we've served over 1,000 babies. We've served over 30,000 students that are kindergartners. We have also made sure that we've had, you know, the national average is around 20% of kids that are in college, graduating from college, and when they drop out in their first year often. Our first year rate of retention is 88%. So that's where we're at in terms of our max. And I think the one other thing I would say, though, is that, you know, people often talk about, all right, that's great. You're helping one kid here, but what about the actual society? What about actual policy? How is this going to stick? So one of the things that we did was we launched what's called a generation fund, and we said, we're going to be able to actually have money in people's accounts up to $4,000 for every kid in need for the next 25 years. How much is that? And we're very close to raising that so that we can look those kids in the face and say, we got you. If you do your part, we'll do ours.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, there are the implications for these programs are when they're weaved together in this way is that they create a network effect and feedback on themselves. So I know in our programs, we give college scholarships in addition to free community college, but you get a little bit more on your scholarship if you had gone to preschool. You get a little bit more on your scholarship if you completed some of the community service digital badges that we had. It's not a lot. It's not enough to by itself to make you do something. But it's a reminder that when we say to the parents bringing their baby home from the hospital, here's what the whole future looks like. And if you stick with it, here's how it all compounds together. And what we found is that system that's creating that a roadmap of possibility, where an agency for the parents as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one key thing. A lot of people are like, well, we can't do a promise program. It's too big. We can't raise all this money. It's not about the money. It's about where at the key transition points. So what we do, just like what Chris talked about, is you get that money if you're a baby, then in kindergarten, then in 5th grade, then in 6th grade, then in 9th grade, then in 10th grade, then in 12th grade. So at each transition point, the money goes up.
I will say, we added one more to our program this past year during COVID, when nobody was getting to be able to go to graduation ceremonies. We said, okay, this is our chance to do one more big idea on the Promise, which was we became the first city in America to automatically admit all graduating high school seniors to college. So they were in California, if you are 18 years old, you're eligible to go to community college. It's automatic. You don't have to meet any requirements, but you have to apply. And nobody knows that, right? So the purpose was really to just remind people, or to give people an insight to an opportunity they already have, to nudge them a little bit further. So every graduating high school senior got a letter of admission from the local community college. They got a letter from me with essentially a scholarship to pay for the whole thing, all of the tuition, which is hardly anything. And then they got a letter from me with a scholarship. And the purpose was to nudge them, but also, honestly, part of my hope was that Grandma would be the one that would accidentally open up the letter on the kitchen table. And she would say, oh my God, Cheryl, honey, I'm so proud of you that you're going to college. And Cheryl's like, I didn't apply to college, but I guess I'm going to. I'm so excited too, Grandma, that trying to think about these things at the human level, at the community level. It's also, I should say, one of the challenges of some of these partnerships is that working with all of my education friends on this program as a mayor, they're constantly wanting to know about persistence rates and take rates and others, and those are all very important. But I said, look, the reason why my city's involved in this is that we had a lot of families saying, when my kid turns ready for 9th grade, we're going to have to move to another town because we just, this isn't. We were going to move to the richer town over that has better schools. That we wanted to create a sense that we were a place that this was a good place to raise a family. Like as a mayor, that's what you want. That's much more important to me than did our community college transfer rates go up from 17% to 17.8. The sense that this is a place to be and that you want to come home to is just as important to folks outside the education sector in terms of helping to build these partnerships. So can we turn to Build Back Better and some of these resources that are out there? And I thought maybe ask you, Cheryl, about some of this, because so much of this, and you were talking about the role of employers, depends on, or is at least maximized, optimized, when employers and K-12 and universities and community colleges and cities and community groups all come together. And there are all these resources that are out there now for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, the Good Jobs Challenge, the application deadline for which is in January. There's, of course, the money for the relief directly to state and local governments. It seems like we might be in a moment where some of the infrastructure that folks like you or the mayor in Shreveport or else, that you need to be able to make some of this happen, there might be a moment to be able to forge this with the resources that are out there for these kind of collaborative regional and local economic and workforce development programs. Do you see a possibility there?
Absolutely. And one of the recent opportunities at Norwalk, we were awarded a $3.4 million grant for strengthening communities through the Department of Labor. And it really allowed us, I think, not only to kind of scale up, but accelerate some of the work that was happening, especially in the workforce development side. So we had the opportunity to accelerate one of our certified nursing aid programs. And so it's one of those pathways that oftentimes graduates, they use it as a pathway to our nursing program or sometimes directly into the workforce. But it's several weeks of study, but we were able to compact it down. Some of the work is happening remotely, whereas previously the technology did not allow us to do that, to provide additional professional development for the faculty in that program, to provide career coaching, and then work with employers who had a need out there to get that commitment to hire some of the graduates. So I think there are these funding opportunities that exist that really allows us to scale up some of the work that's happening. So I'm really excited. I find now, like over the last several months, really just the sense of collaboration that exists across the state, because now even incorporating some of our childcare providers into the discussion in terms of, okay, we have this graduate from the CNA program. We have an offer of employment, but this person is a working mom who's struggling with childcare. And so now what can we do? And so it's been, for me, really exciting to see just all of the collaboration that's taking place across the state. And I think now the additional funding opportunities that are coming, it's quite frankly, I think it's right in time.
That's great. So, and most of these don't say pathways on them. So I think if you're the chair of the budget subcommittee in the state senate in Tallahassee, or you're a mayor and you're being asked to sign on to an application for one of these regional funds that the local chambers put together, this is the ask. Like, how is this application, how's this new program going to advance career pathways? Because I've heard that there may be some way to do that, even those small asks can make a big difference in trying to move some of these gigantic resource pots that are coming out there to help advance this work. So I was going to turn to you, David, but you're getting preempted by somebody that's I know important to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Sounds
come back.
good.
Because,
We'll get the mayor on it.
yeah, I think it would be important to get your mayor there. So next we're going to be joined by video by the mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf, who is, as David has suggested, one of the most profound impacts around the country has been the creation of this entire Oakland Promise program, both for what it's done in Oakland, as we've heard about, but also for what it's inspired around the country. Not just a set of individual programs, but also the linkage of them together. And I think probably the most powerfully, and I know it affected me because it caused me to start the West Sacramento Home Run, is the notion that it's possible, that we can actually do something. So many of us are involved in policy domains are like, well, if we reduce the amount of people in prison, we could fund schools and we could take some of the surplus and use it for healthcare. And it's just like sort of way up here academically, like something somebody could do, but it's not something that you're doing. And I think what Mayor Schaaf has done in Oakland is demonstrated that these set of things, each one of which seems almost impossible, then when you undertake them together, that you can rally and intensify the amount of support and resources in ways that were unimaginable looking at them one at a time. And so she's also well known as one of former President Trump's most hated mayors in America. I don't. That's not directly from her bio, but and she earned that every day. So she's joining us now live, Mayor Libby Schaaf.
That was such a great intro, Chris Cabaldon. It is awesome to see you virtually, and I'm so sad to not be there in person in Washington, D.C. with all of you. And just excited to talk a little bit. Chris, I think you wanted me to talk about political advice to make this happen. Is that correct?
Yes. This room loves political advice.
Well, advice number one, and I don't think I need to go into detail on this, is everyone needs a David Silver. You just heard like his enthusiasm, his unbelievable amount of energy. One incredible staff member that believes and never gives up, never lets that energy level down. It's incredible what it can create. And just a quick story about how David came to my office. In Oakland, the mayor has no power or jurisdiction over education whatsoever. And we transferred from a city manager form of government to a strong mayor government just in 1999. And I have to tell you, the budget for the office did not really transfer with it. So we still have a very kind of small, scrappy office. And so I didn't really feel like I could dedicate a whole position in my small office to education when it was something that I actually didn't have control over. And so don't ever hesitate going out to the philanthropic community and ask them to fund talent in your office. I think there is an amazing case to be made about why investing in public sector leaders, it has one of the best returns on investment ever. And so David's position was entirely funded by philanthropy for 1 year. We had 1 year to prove to the city council that they should expand my budget to keep him in place. And we did that. So rule number 1, have a David Silver. And if you don't have funding for it, go out and hustle it up. Second piece of advice, and I know David talked about this a little bit, about the going big piece. When I first became the mayor, and I'm sure everybody had this experience, everybody runs to you with their brilliant idea that they want you to implement or champion. And it feels pretty overwhelming. And I know for myself, I had like 3 great ideas. The college savings accounts, the K to 12, which San Francisco, our neighbor, had started so successfully. The idea of expanding college scholarships significantly was something that our superintendent really wanted me to focus, as well as starting these future centers that David talked a little bit about. And then I had another idea from someone in local philanthropy about that brilliant baby idea. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do all these things. It's too much. I should just pick one and succeed at that. And then I had this epiphany that if we did all of them, we would probably be more successful at all of them, because these things are interrelated and they really create a continuum of supports. And that it felt much less overwhelming to bundle it as a single continuum, a single cradle to career initiative, or as David likes to call it, a movement called the Oakland Promise. It felt much less overwhelming, more doable. And what it allowed me to do was also to launch with several champions already in place, several people who felt like this is their brilliant idea that I am enabling as mayor. And so to have that broad-based buy-in and to have existing champions is also politically very wise. And in my case, one was a city council member, one was a school board member, and that was very helpful for the implementation and support for the total initiative. The next piece of political advice is build a true collective impact effort. And that does take work. And that's why you need suggestion number 1, a David Silver. David created multiple implementation teams. He created a pledge where just volunteers could go out and ask everyday Oaklanders to sign the pledge that they believe in the Oakland Promise. They support its vision. He also created an MOU with all the different organizations and nonprofits that were doing work that was related to the Oakland Promise and its vision. So instead of seeing the Oakland Promise as a competitor, they saw it as an initiative that was really lifting up their work and linking it together and creating a better connection between these longtime existing nonprofits and the city government. So that was a whole new category, partnership organizations. And then finally, David created an MOU with all of our higher education institutions, specific signed agreements, promises for Oakland kids. Chris, your inspirational example of guaranteed admission is the kind of agreement that you can get. It was exciting, though, to get MOUs, not just from our local higher education institutions, but a lot of our historically Black colleges and universities, our HBCUs, that were even outside of Oakland, to get Oakland kids dreaming about going to those great institutions as well. And then here's another good political trick. Every year we would have a community report out, a big event. David loves putting on events and getting that energy up. And we would distribute an annual report, and that thing would be thick. It would be thick because he would print the names of every individual, every man, woman, and child who had signed the I support the Oakland Promise pledge. He would list every single implementation committee and who served on it. He would list every single organization that signed onto that MOU. I mean, this was a big tent. Everyone saw themselves as holding a piece of this vision and having ownership in it. And that ownership was continually reaffirmed through events, these committee meetings, and the annual report. So that is a piece of political advice. And then my last piece of political advice is do a fiscal sustainability analysis. We did hustle up private funds to bring in someone who really looked at and analyzed long-term, what will it cost us to keep this initiative going? And if we raised a big chunk of money up front and invested it through, our community foundation and spent down both the income and the corpus over time, could that generate more financial support than just doing what the traditional nonprofit does, which is just try and, every year churn out that fundraising? And we set a very audacious goal of creating what we call the Generation Fund. So that is 25 years of the actual dollars that go into the hands of students and families through all of those, that whole cradle to career continuum that David just outlined for you. And the number was a little scary, $50 million. If we could raise $50 million up front, we would have the money in the bank, with the interest projections to support an entire generation of every single Oakland child for the next quarter of a century. And we haven't quite closed it yet, but we are literally within $2.4 million of reaching that $50 million goal. Having a goal, having something that is very specific and that is going to produce a very specific impact is really motivating to donors. And so David said it already, we often fail by not being ambitious or audacious enough. But when we define that audaciousness, when we put research behind it, and we sell a big vision that will be transformative, not just nibbling around the edges, not just serving the handful of kids that are lucky enough to get into this program or that program, but really transforming the reality for an entire city of children. People are excited by bigness. And so I encourage you most of all to dream big, to not be intimidated by it, and to have a David Silver, and to build all of that ownership and excitement in a whole host of people and leaders and organizations in your community. So not only is it successful while you have your leadership role, but for many, many years after you're gone. So that's kind of my political advice, and I'm happy to talk to about what I see for the Oakland Promise and other kind of collective impact efforts in Oakland in the coming years, how we're really building on the success and the network.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Maybe on that last point, if I could ask you, because that was a really powerful summary of what it takes. And I know David also, you released David to be able to help. David is working with communities all around the country now in order to do this. So the notion of tip number one is much more achievable than it might have sounded at the beginning, because David is specifically now in that role. But I'm wondering if to your last point about other collective impact efforts, and I don't know if you heard the last conversation that Cheryl and I were having just about these economic and workforce collaboratives, and some in California. There's the Economic Resilience Fund that's coming forward, and lots. You cannot walk down the street without running into a tumbleweed's worth of these new funding programs that are out there for economic and workforce development. What do you see in terms of the opportunities there for the Oakland Promise as an example, to be able to connect in more affirmative ways to the workforce system and to economic development and entrepreneurship too?
Well, one of the great things that we were able to do, and Chris, thank you for highlighting, when you have a successful program, we all, learn from each other and start replicating. And we created the Northern California College Promise Coalition. So to bring all the College Promise programs together under a unified leadership. From Fresno to Sacramento to San Francisco, San Jose, that is powerful. And again, kudos to David for having that idea. And that allows you to be a very powerful force, not only in utilizing resources like workforce development resources. And like, for example, recently that coalition had a job fair for graduates from all of our different cities with major employers that serve each one of our markets. So like the Gap was there, the Golden State Warriors were there. That's a pretty sexy employer. So that kind of economy of scale is very powerful, but it's not just powerful for utilizing resources. It doesn't just make you an attractive investment. It also creates a potential lobbying force. And the Northern California College Promise Coalition has actually started a lobbying agenda, legislation to bring in front of our legislators. For example, we helped sponsor a bill to try and make sure that Promise scholarships do not count against a student's ability to qualify for financial aid. That kind of advocacy is really far more powerful when you do it with a big group of other cities and programs than if you go it alone. So I think that coalition has been a great example and very inspiring.
And Northern California maybe is can be defined fairly loosely, so that Lincoln, Nebraska, or Shreveport, or Parkland, Florida, any of them could be Scranton, Pennsylvania,
we're happy to throw it
greater
open,
Northern
man.
California.
What do you think, David? We could have some affiliates, some out of area affiliates. I like it.
If Mayor Schaaf and Chris Cabaldon say it, it will be done. Yes.
Yeah, the finances I thought were really interesting. I know in our program that one of the things that we discovered was, because everybody was worried that it was going to be more than we could possibly sustain financially. And at the outset, it was actually way cheaper than all of my colleagues thought it would be. But I think it was mentioned in my intro, I was vice chancellor of the community college system, so I already knew that it's already almost free in terms of tuition to go. So it's not going to be that much to cover whatever that gap is. And my city's small, so I can almost name all of the 5-year-old, all the 4-year-olds that need preschool. I can almost name them all. So, and most of them are eligible for some sort of program or subsidy that they're not currently using. So when you start to add it up, it's not that much. And then of course, then there are the negative reasons why it wasn't that much. Is that hardly anybody was persisting to the second year at the community college. So we don't have to pay for the second year, at least at the beginning. So what we found, though, over time was that our costs were going up because our students were doing better, because they were actually going to college and persisting to that next year. But they were going down by more because the legislature and the governor were inspired by the Oakland Promise and the West Sacramento Home Run and other initiatives to deal with some of these things at the state level, which they should be. In terms of providing additional support for college savings accounts and for free community college and all of that. We still do it. It's still essential for us to be packaging the program together, even if we're not the ones spending every dollar anymore, because it is so important for us to be able to share for the mom and dad bringing the baby home from the hospital what the future looks like and how it's part of a community. So our role as the platform still is critical, but the finances have turned out to be much easier than we had anticipated, in part because others are learning from us at the state and at the federal level too, and I know that's been true with Oakland.
And can I add, David, I don't know if you put up one of your favorite slides that we showed of potential funders, but it's called the return on investment slide. And one of the things that we demonstrate is just by inspiring that curiosity and belief that you're going to college, and by investing in these kind of college access professionals. I don't know about your communities, but we are woefully understaffed with regard to like college counselors or guidance counselors. So that's another resource the Oakland Promise provides. But we've demonstrated that the amount of money the Oakland Promise actually invests is so amplified by connecting students to the resources that they already qualified for, but they just didn't know about. Whether it's the financial aid packages or other scholarships that these access professionals help connect students to, that $1 of Oakland Promise money is matched by about $4 to $5 of other money that is out there, but wasn't being accessed by our students before, just out of ignorance.
So thanks very much for having me and for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. I wanted to do just a few things. One, share our perspective on why this conversation is so important, but more important than that is to make an offer of assistance. We know that there is sometimes a gap between our aspirations and our ability to make those aspirations happen, especially if you are a legislator and you may say have not a full-time David, but you might have a half-time someone who is not David. So at All for Ed, we would like to help to fill in the gap. And we would like to be there for you to do policy research, legislative development, assistance with advocacy, and definitely with no charge to you. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we're mission driven. So where our missions align, that's where we would like to be of assistance. If I could offer you, or if anyone could offer you, an investment opportunity where you put in $1 and per the Oakland Promise, you get $5 back, or according to the American Institute for Research, with early college as an example, you put in $1 and you get $15 in return, we would be silly to not take that up. Right now, we have pockets of excellence. We have the Oakland Promise. We have what's going on in Norwalk. There are individual examples of P-TECH. There are other similar examples like Link Learning, which the mayor mentioned in California. But it is in no way as broad-reaching, as systemic as it needs to be to address one of the key statistics that the mayor mentioned at the beginning of the panel. 80% of good-paying jobs require a post-secondary education. Even before the pandemic, this was a huge problem because only 37% of 12th graders are actually performing at the college-ready level in math and in reading. But when we add the pandemic to this, the situation gets even more important to address because since 2019, freshman enrollment overall has gone down by about 13%, and in community colleges, it's gone down by over 20%. And when we look at the numbers for students of color, for Latinx students, for example, it's well over 20%. For African American students, it's well over 30%. We're never going to achieve our equity goals if we don't do a better job of getting more kids into post-secondary. And by concentrating on these pathways, and specifically a component that I want to raise up is this notion of early college credit. All right? If students are earning credit while they are at college credit while they're in high school, and that transfers to their post-secondary institution, the data shows that they will be more likely to earn the degree, and it will also cost less. Most of our attempts to reduce the cost of college don't actually reduce the cost of college. They change who pays for it. So for example, the federal Pell Grant. Big supporter of the federal Pell Grant and don't want to give an indication otherwise. But it doesn't actually reduce the cost of college. It changes who pays for it, right? Instead of the student paying for it, it's the federal government paying some. What early college credit does is actually reduce the cost of college because it then takes less time for a student to earn the degree. So if students earn a year's worth of credit before they ever graduate from high school, they can get their associate's degree in 1 year instead of 2. Or they can get their 4-year degree maybe in 3 years instead of 4. And so these types of approaches we really need to be bringing to scale. And with the funds that have been coming from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan especially, there's an opportunity to do that. The funding is completely flexible. We just have to be proactive about doing it. So at All for Ed, just want to offer you a couple different opportunities. We do policy research. We can share information about what's going on, both a deep dive in your state, but also in comparison to many other states. We'll help you with policy development. So both what does the data say, and then what does that mean for your state? We can be your back office support and help to actually develop the legislation. We'll help you with advocacy strategy. And when you need outside support, this is where that third-party validator, we can either help to identify folks in the community or come in, and we've done this in many states, and testify on behalf of good ideas. So our contact information is here. We just want to be a helping hand. I'd like to formally thank our colleagues at the Joyce Foundation for supporting the partnership that we have with the New Deal. And my colleague here, Jen Ellis, and my CEO, Deb Delisle, are both here. We'd be more than happy to have sidebar conversations with you about ideas that you have, and look forward to continuing to work together. Thanks very much.